Today we are going to talk about how to create events in escWorks. And the first thing we're going to do is you're going to sign in with your account information. All right, so once you get signed in, then this is going to take you to the main escWorks page. Don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like mine. I have access to certain things that other folks may not have access to, and for some crazy reason, my screens may not be in the same order, but everything I describe should be on your screen. So when you're going to create an event, it's a two-step process, and the first step is course management. So in course management, you have events and you have master events. Master events are the overreaching umbrella description of any particular event that's going to be scheduled. So, for example, if you have a staff meeting with your PLC and you have that, say, every Wednesday, well, you would have to create a master event called PLC meeting, and then that's all that would go in that master event, and then whatever description might go with every single time this is scheduled, you might want to put that in there, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And so that's a master event. The event is when you actually want to schedule those meetings. So I'm going to play around with that for just a second so you can get an idea. So when you go to master events, the first thing you may do is you may get a screen that pops up that says module settings. If that's the case, what I would suggest is you choose the create option and tell it to set that as your default coming into the master event. So what that does is that sets it up so that anytime you go to master events, it assumes you're trying to create one. So what you want to do is you want to give it a title. So I will give it a title, and I'm just going to call this test PLC meeting. All right. So this is the generic title of whatever that particular event happens to be. PLC meeting. It might be. It could be. If you regularly are going to be doing a workshop, or even if you're doing a one-off workshop where it is Chromebooks in your classroom, then you would call this, Chromebooks in the classroom, or whatever you want to call your particular event. Now, the description here is the very generic description that would go to every single time this event was going to be scheduled. This is the information that would go in this description box right here. So, for example, I might say, please bring your device. Well, I'll tell you what. What I would probably do is say something like, this is a meeting for the PLC members. Whoops, sorry. Please bring your device and sample, I don't know, sample work. I don't know, whatever applies to whatever you're doing. Okay, so below that, and again, this is the generic description. So, for example, if next Wednesday they needed to, in addition to their device and sample work, you wanted them to bring a particular book, then you would not put that here. You would put that later when we actually schedule the event, because that only applies to that one particular meeting, right? Okay, so here we have the event type, and so you have different event types. Generally speaking, you will most likely either have a professional development, and that is if if the attendees get credit for being at this particular event, then they would get professional development credit. Otherwise, you're most likely probably going to just put other event type. So this just happens to be a PLC meeting, so I'm going to put other event type. In terms of credit, I will just say that they will get other credit because, generally speaking, the only time they get hours is if it's PD. So the shortcut way to remember that is if it's not PD, then it's going to be other. Okay. If it is PD, then it's going to be PD and hours. All right. So very easy to remember. Other, or PD and hours, and that will cover 99% of any workshops that you want to put in there. So now the next, you'll notice that those have stars. Anything with a star is required. Anything that does not have a star, you'll notice strand does not have a star. Anything without a star is optional. So what I can do with strand is if I want to assign particular strands to this workshop or this event, I can go down here and I can choose one. So for example, if I wanted to say it had to do with classroom management, I would choose the strand and hit add, and notice that it adds it to the list. And then I go down and pick the next one. So maybe it's building a collaborative learning community, and we add that one. You'll notice that every time you add one, it removes it from the drop down list. All right. The other thing is that let's say you pick one and you don't want it, then you can double click. So if I double click classroom management, it will remove it and put it back in the list. All right. So only the things down in the box below are actually being added. Anything up in the list is just up in the list. Okay, so the same thing with subjects. If there are particular subjects that apply to this event every single time, remember, we're creating a master event here. So anything you choose in these categories has to apply every single time this is going to be scheduled. So if it turns out that sometimes, like maybe you have a PLC for your math teachers and you have a PLC for your science teachers. If you're creating a generic PLC meeting, then you would not want to put those subjects in here. If, however, you were wanting to create a master event specifically for your math teachers, then you could say this is the math PLC meeting. And again, that would be something that would then have to be scheduled each time. I know that's a little confusing, but just I'm trying to just kind of refresh your memory here, or at least give you an idea as to what's happening. Okay, the breakout sessions you can absolutely ignore. You will most likely never use breakout sessions. That is for if you're setting up a conference. I really wouldn't worry about that at all. The audience, is there a particular audience that always applies to this particular event? If not, don't worry about it. You can add an audience for each specific one later. All right. You will not choose statewide ever. You can allow multi-enroll, which is a way to get people into the workshop if you want to. And then, of course, you would not choose retired because we're creating one, and retired means that no one can sign up for it. So you're not going to create one that you immediately retire. All right. So basically, you have to have a title. You have to have some kind of generic description. Uh, you have to choose an event type, either and a credit type. So either other or professional development and hours. Then if you want to, you can add strands, subjects, audience members, and I would go ahead and check allow multi-enroll just because later when you add people it'll be easier to do. Okay. So we click next, and essentially what this does is this gives you a review of what you put in there. So if it turns out that you had misspelled something or whatever, you could go back to the previous and fix it. Otherwise, you're going to hit finish, and now it says that this ID has been made. And what I would do is I would jot down that MEL, and a MEL is Master Event List ID. And so in our case, I'm going to jot that down because you will need that later in the next step. So that's how you create the master event. Again, that's the umbrella event that you're going to, the umbrella name of a particular event that you're going to schedule. You have to create a master event before you can schedule anything. Okay, that is required.